Welcome to episode number 6 of the Sobriety Blueprint podcast. This is the men's guide to thriving in recovery and life. I'm your host, Jonathan Sylvester. Whether you're listening to the show on Spotify, Apple Music, or you're watching on YouTube, please share this with your friends, follow, subscribe, and leave a review. On this episode, I'll be speaking with Tom Shanahan, who's the founder of Spiritual Adrenaline. This is an exercise and nutrition program that was specifically designed to work in conjunction with the 12 steps. He also authored the Spiritual Adrenaline book, which I'm sure he's going to be telling us more about here in just a moment. Tom, thanks for hopping on with me, man. I'm really, really glad to have you here. And thanks again for your time.
My pleasure, Jonathan. You know, I've been following you and Recovery You on Instagram. We've been chatting back and forth. So finally, I'm here and I'm really excited to share my experience, strength, and hope with the audience and to be part of this with what the work you're doing. It's awesome stuff. Awesome stuff.
Awesome, man. Yeah, I think like we were just chatting about, we're definitely on the same page here. And so I want to dive into this. And you were touching on experience, strength, and hope, which is really at the end of the day, you know, what recovery is all about, and what I'm really trying to share as much of as possible of on this podcast. And I see you're doing some really incredible things with Spiritual Adrenaline. I want to hear all about it. I want to hear all about the program and the book. But first, tell us briefly how your addiction led to where you are today.
Well, I think that I believe in like the disease theory of addiction in the sense that I believe there's a genetic predisposition, and on both sides of my family tree, if I lay out my family tree, there are some people with some major addiction issues. Whether they admit it or not, it's a whole nother issue. And so I grew up around that kind of just behavior, if you will, not from all family members, but from many. And I just think as much as when you see somebody abusing alcohol or food or whatever it is, you say, I'm not going to do that. But, you know, I think it's just the being around it, it tends to repeat and be transferred down intergenerationally from like the trauma from one generation to another. And so early on in my life, I've always been successful. I've always been involved in government and politics, and I'm a lawyer, you know, but I also drank a lot. And the reality is, which was common, quite frankly, amongst the politicians that I was around and in the circles I traveled in and all the rest. But also I smoked cigarettes, I drank a lot, and then a whole bunch of things happened. And, you know, I used to think they were a really big deal, but they all happened one after the other. None of them really directly impacting my long-term health or well-being, but it was overwhelming, and it had to do with a lot of people I cared about. I was terminated from a very high-profile government job under very unfair conditions. My colleague, who I still share office space with, a couple of months later, her son was paralyzed from the neck down snowboarding. I took over her law practice so she could leave for a year to care for her son. Then 2 months later, someone who I refer to as my brother, he's really a cousin, was paralyzed from the neck down skiing. And so his kids kind of disappeared after the accident. And I wound up being involved almost in his day-to-day care and making all the decisions as his power of attorney and healthcare proxy. You know, he never recovered from that accident. So I'm practicing law. I'm covering my friends' law practice. I got fired from a high-profile job. So people are like, what happened? That was a big, to-do. Then my brother gets paralyzed. A couple months later, my mom, who's never been sick in her entire life, comes down and calls me and tells me she has throat cancer. So my sister has little kids. I'm driving back and forth up to Albany to help with the care for my mom, who I adore. And so all this stuff, and I'm practicing law. And, you know, I started doing a lot of cocaine to try and keep up with the demands. And like now I realize I was a people pleaser who couldn't say no, you know, especially to family members. Like, no, you have to participate. No, you have to help. And, you know, put my own best interests above other people's. And so that just led me down a path because it's just not sustainable in the long term, that kind of behavior. And I wound up in rehab and I'm speaking there tomorrow. I'm really excited.
Oh, that's awesome.
It's my third time back. Yeah. So I'm going back tomorrow. It's called Conifer Park. Okay. It's near my mom's place in Albany, New York, my sister's house. And so, yeah, I went up there, and then I just decided to take it really seriously because I had tried to quit drinking before. And I said I would go to 12-step meetings. I go, I'm here for the meeting part of the program, right? I'm not going to work the steps. I'm going to do it my way. I'm not
Right.
going to choose the people, places, and things. And I had failed. So this time I started to do it really, really seriously and take it seriously. I came out of rehab really fat. I put on about 30 pounds in rehab, and I continued to, just because I started to smoke more in early recovery. And I also started eating like really heavy carbohydrates, like in like rehab, and I never stopped. And I started to realize as time went on, I'm like, if I continue to eat this way, if I continue like to abuse my body, I just don't think I'm going to be able to maintain sobriety. And I started to go to meetings, and I would realize, like I'm chugging coffee with sugar in it, smoking more than I was smoking, active addiction. I'm putting weight on, doing fellowship at night. And I just realized, in the way the steps were so effectively dealing with my mind, I needed to make conscious contact with my body, because I didn't want to wind up being, let's say, mentally fit, but also physically sick. And I do think, the treatment models today tend to be, and I'm getting away from my own personal experience, but they tend to be really focused on the brain, but not the body. It's kind of like we're bobbleheads,
Yeah.
and what's happening down here doesn't matter. And I just think that's the wrong approach. What we talk about in spiritual adrenaline, a lot of people go, that's bullshit. I gave this up. I gave that up. Well, I'm not giving this up. Food is this, cigarettes are this. But the reality is they're substances, right?
Right.
So they impact our body. And so what we're saying is, it's not so much like on the outside, the aesthetics, although I do have, in my 50s, I have six-pack abs, and I'm really proud of that. But my blood work is better in my 50s than it was in my 40s and probably my 30s. And so I feel great. I haven't been sick in years. And, it's a full, what I call it's a full recovery. It's making conscious contact with my body. And it's benefited me, and it's benefiting the plan of the book. I have a copy of it here.
Yeah.
People can check out what it looks like. If you see it, check out our Facebook page, check out our Instagram feed. But other people are practicing the program in this book now, and they're also benefiting. So I'm really excited to be on your show, to be able to share that vision and that message.
Yeah, man. No, I appreciate you just filling us in on your background a little bit. I'll just tell you, man, you are speaking my language big time on so many fronts. The thing that I saw is when I came into recovery, and I talk about this a lot as well, is it just seems so backwards to me. I saw these people, and some of them had long-term sobriety. But this is where we kind of need to take a look at maybe the strength versus the length, right? The quality of the recovery that some of these people had, because I would see these guys that maybe, let's just say a guy had 10 years sober, right? But he's got diabetes, he's chain smoking cigarettes. He
White knuckling it. They call it white knuckling it.
Right. Yeah. And he looks miserable. And so kind of what you're saying, I came in, and I'll just tell you, like, my background, I wasn't in shape. I had never been in the gym. I had I was about 80 pounds heavier for a big part of my life. And I was, the way I describe it, I was shaped like a pear when I came out of rehab, giant love handles and no upper body, skinny little arms, and I had always wanted to get in shape. And I took that opportunity to, but like you're saying, it didn't make sense to me that we come into recovery and we leave, most of us anyway, I would say most guys leave the physical aspect of recovery out of it. And I think it's mind, body, spirit, right? Like it all works together, and you can't leave one part out, I don't think.
Well, let me just say this. What's really interesting about the whole history of this is, I did a lot of research for the book. The book is, by the way, evidence-based, because when I was trying to learn, like I got certified as a personal trainer in sports nutrition. I'm taking advanced nutrition courses now. I continue to try and learn. But when I was like in the beginning of this, trying to learn, I was buying books on Amazon or online and reading things that sounded really great. But then I would look and see where the author got, where the conclusion, what was the science that backed up this, like, for example, the vitamin cure to alcoholism, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't science-based, and it was the author's personal opinion. So I went through a lot of trouble, and it took years to write this book because it's evidence-based. Everything is cited to the scientific peer-reviewed studies. So it's not just what I think, it's what science has proven. And I say that because what you're saying is completely consistent. When in New York State, 92% of the people who are admitted into inpatient rehab institutions are either type 2 diabetic or hypoglycemic, okay?
I'm sorry, what was that number again?
92%, between 60 to 92%, depending on the
Wow.
facility. I'm going with the high number.
Yeah.
The Mayo Clinic, which is a very reputable institution in California, did a research study on what causes people in long-term recovery, defined as more than 5 years, what's the leading cause of death. 52% of people with more than 5 years sober, according to the Mayo Clinic, and again, the citations to their studies are in my book, so you can just check it out for yourself, die of a smoking-related illness, either because of smoking and active addiction or because they continued to smoke or smoked more in recovery.
Wow.
So there is really an epidemic of there's health crises within the quote-unquote recovery community, which most people don't talk about. So when I started to see those numbers, I was like, wow, how did we get here, right? And I wanted to do the research to find out, why there was such a gap in the 12-step program in the context of the physical well-being. AA World, I requested permission. I was given permission to go to the AA World Services Research Library, and I was given access to all original materials from the days of the early days, if you will.
Okay, like the archives, basically.
Right? The archives, that's right. There's a whole chapter in my book that lays out the history of the 12 steps, right, in the context of both physical well-being, in the context of nutrition, exercise, and supplementation. So I was able to find early examples. Like there's a guy named Eddie that in the book, Dr. Bob and the Old Timers, they talked about Eddie. Eddie was someone who couldn't stop relapsing, and so they would experiment with different foods, and they said which foods worked and which foods didn't work. They seemed to think frankfurters, like hot dogs, baking soda, and some other things ketchup would work for him. And actually there's some science explaining why those things might help in the shorter term. And so those were things they found that Eddie didn't relapse after he ate, or at least he would get more time sober. So I found that intriguing that they would do kind of informal early work on that.
Yeah.
And then we had Duncan Silkworth, Dr. Silkworth, who came up with the theory about the role that it's a misnomer, but that alcoholics have an allergic type reaction to alcohol. And he was the one who, with Bill Wilson, came up with the quote unquote sister foods to alcohol. And I list those 6 sister foods in my book, a couple of them, French fries, starchy foods, pastas. And they understood way back in the day, in the beginning of the program, that there was a relationship between these heavy starchy carbs, right, and the desire to drink. And that when people would stop drinking, they tended to go for these carbs. They were called the sister foods to alcohol because of the chemical breakdown in the brain. It prompted serotonin, endorphin production, and it mimicked in many ways the role of alcohol. And so Bill Wilson, who smoked for his whole life, he died of emphysema, and also suffered from depression, was a big believer in trying to change. When he felt best, when he was least depressed, was when he was eating better and trying to deal with the smoking and taking supplements. He took niacin. Yeah. He actually wrote 2 pamphlets. I reference them in my book, and I have citations in my book to physicians. And he wanted the 12 AA International to adopt a nutritional component of the program and also adopt recommendations in the context of the supplementation that people in recovery should take, not only to help them stay sober, but to help them nourish their body after drinking, there's like a lot of calories in alcohol, but no nutrients, right? So you got to get the nutrients in. And then I'm going to get to the end here. So what happened was the AA board said to him that you don't have those qualifications. You're not a doctor to be doing this kind of advocacy. And it's violation of one of our traditions is we don't take a position on outside issues. So you have to make a decision. Do you want to stay on the AA board and continue to advocate for the organization you founded? And if you want to continue to advocate on these issues, you need to resign from the board.
Wow.
And so that was the end of his public advocacy on these issues. He decided to stay on the board. but he started to write about what he called emotional sobriety.
Yeah, right.
What he referenced as emotional sobriety,
Yes.
what he called it the next frontier, was the integration of the health of the body with the health of the mind. So I thought that was really interesting, and I thought it was an important chapter. My publisher actually wanted to take that chapter out because the book is 90,000 words, and my agent, and I said, no, it needs to be there because people have said I'm attacking the 12 steps, that what I'm saying is, these are outside issues. And my argument is, no. What I'm saying is completely consistent with the history of the steps and what their purpose was and the intentions of the founders. And so what we're doing here is really talking about that level of emotional sobriety.
Yeah, absolutely. So, look, you've touched on a lot there, but one of the things that I would completely agree with, and I kind of joke around about sometimes, but it's so true for me, is I would say that the phenomenon of craving that is talked about when it comes to alcohol in the big book is so true for me when it comes to sugar. Because, like, I'll give you an example. Like, my wife and I are at our engagement party, okay, and kind of like you were talking about, this is something that we are predisposed to, which I agree with as well. I'm definitely predisposed to having a sweet tooth. Like, it's just up and down both sides of the family. And so
Right.
there are these delicious little cupcakes there. And I'm having a conversation with someone. And before I even realize it, I've eaten like 12 of them. And I'm
Yeah,
not even
yeah.
full.
Rob, I think we were separated at birth, man. I think you and I might have been separated. You see,
Yeah.
you're proving my theories in the books.
Yeah, no, absolutely, man. I mean, it triggers something to where, like, if I have some sugar, and it's not, and most of the time it's a mindless thing for me, but a lot of the times if I have, anything that's real sugary, I mean, man, it triggers it to where I just want more and I want more and I want.
Yeah. I call, and I write about this in the book, sugar my gateway drug. When I was a kid, I'm at my mom's house, and she can verify all this. When I was a kid, I would eat not just one piece of chocolate cake, I'd eat the whole cake. Like, I could eat chocolate all day. I went once to the dentist, I had 11 cavities. And so I agree. I think, yeah. I mean, it's a real issue. And then, I go around and I speak publicly about the book and about what the lifestyle is about. And I'll ask people, like, so how many of you can have just one potato chip or one Dorito, right? And no hands come up. And then I'll say, how many of you will finish the entire bag? And all the arms in the room go up. And so, I mean, this is just a consistent thing. So it's something we really need to understand and realize. And I'm thinking also that for parents who absorb those kinds of behaviors, especially in parents and families that have histories of addiction, and in the past, I think it's fair to say many families didn't want to deal with the issue, right? It just continued intergenerationally and no one talked about it, although everybody knew and suffered, right? But like, when parents start to see those types of behaviors in kids, that really should be a warning sign that, yeah, it may just be a kid who just loves candy, right? But there may be more to it. And so they can watch and see how the behaviors, manifest over time. But it's the same way. And it's all about instant gratification. That's what it's all about. It's just like cocaine. It's just like pot. It's just like all the drugs and alcohol, right? Alcohol gives you that rush in the short term, and then it brings you down and it makes you miserable. So you want more, and you want to get that instant gratification again without thinking about the long-term consequences. And so that's a major issue. But I think the traditional thinking amongst many old timers, but others as well, in 12-step circles is, well, this is a lesser evil, right? I gave up my drug and my alcohol, so I can eat as many Doritos as I want. I can eat cheese fries at midnight. Here's the deal. You can do that, but there's going to be consequences. And all the research indicates that the people in discovery have lifestyle related illnesses disproportionate to the general population. And the general population, especially in this country, we're not exactly the healthiest country in the planet, right? So there's really serious consequences that come with it. And I also think it dramatically increases the risk of relapse. And the reason to why is you're not breaking that cycle. Whether it's alcohol and drugs or it's Doritos and candy and chocolate, right? It's the cycle of spiking your blood sugar, feeling great, right? Yeah, I'm loving life. And then you crash And then you replicate, right? You crave, you just, and you want to replicate the high again. So whether it's alcohol or drugs or chocolate, I mean, it's the same thing in respect to how it's mimicking the substance of choice from days and active addiction up here in the head.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, see, and look, I really like that. And you could ask the guys that have come through my coaching program, the recovery coaching program, like, man, I tell them I am big. The information I'm giving them that I talk about in terms of nutrition and exercise, it is evidence based. I care about what the numbers say. I care about what you sounded like me for a second. What does the science say? That's what matters. I don't want to hear some opinion, and I want to hear, what the numbers actually say. And, I think that's super, super important. So you're touching on a lot of really interesting numbers and facts that I actually haven't heard before. And you're touching on why this, and that's really what I want to go into deeper is like, why should this really matter, right? Like why should guys care about this? And how does it really, affect, relapse? My thinking is this, and I'd like for you to go a little bit more into it, but my general thinking is this, is that, if I come into recovery, I get sober, and I start growing in all these different ways, mentally and in terms of how I think about drugs and alcohol, and hopefully spiritually I'm growing. My life starts to get better. But my thought is that, if I have zero energy, I have zero confidence, I don't feel good about, who I see in the mirror. I don't feel good about who this guy is. That it's only going to make the recovery process more difficult. And at the end of the day, if I don't, feel good or look good or any of that, then man, I'm probably not going to be very motivated to stay sober, right? I'm not going to be living my best life.
Right. No, I agree with you. I mean, we have to be real about what the numbers say. And that's why I spent years doing the research. According to AA's own statistics, after 10 years, it's less than 10% of the people are still sober without, that's their statistic. So think about the reality for your clients, the readers of my book, people out there watching this broadcast, is they're not going to make it, okay? Yeah. Or they're going to be the constant relapsers who go to meetings and look, if someone's happy, I don't mean to sound judgmental or anything. If they're happy and they're eating whatever they want to do and they don't care about their weight, that's one thing.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Here's what I observe. And you tell me if it's maybe just an isolated incident, maybe a little bit more of a pattern, is people I've known, I've been sober now for 8.5 years, right? I haven't smoked in 6 years on September 27th of this year, is I see people who've been coming to the same meetings complaining about the same things over and over. Nothing ever seems to get better, okay? Then they disappear for a little while, and when they come back, it turns out they relapsed, right? And this is like a cycle that I see, never with any improvement.
Right.
I think that's what we're talking about. And so what people need to wake up to, in our country, I think we're more dysfunctional than maybe some others in this respect. Number one, whether you're sober or you're using, we believe in instantaneous gratification, right? We're big believers in that. Social media takes advantage of that. How many likes did I get on this post, right? It's all this constant mind fuck by companies that make a lot of money off of keeping us hooked, right? We can't get off. Secondarily, Americans, and especially those in recovery, with all due respect to my friends in recovery, they believe that a pill can solve everything. So I get type 2 diabetes, I'm going to take something that helps prompt insulin, blah, blah, blah. And then, but the reality with that is after a while, it stops working. You need more. And then eventually it stops working. And, all of this visceral fat around the waist, it's not just about how it looks when you have a beer belly that protrudes out from inflammation.
Right.
Visceral fat putting stress on critical organs is the leading cause of cardiac disease. It's the leading cause of kidney disease.
Absolutely.
There are serious consequences. And pills, the pharmaceutical solution is relied on. And the last thing I'll say about this, and maybe you'll start your listeners will start to realize how opinionated I am on this, is I fundamentally believe that the system of recovery in this country is controlled. There's billions of dollars in pharmaceuticals and repeated relapsing and readmission to inpatient treatments or outpatient treatment programs, right? There's not a lot of money in sobriety, okay?
Right.
The insurance, doesn't have to pay for whatever. So the point is that the institutional recovery model tends to support, okay, we'll readmit you. Well, try this antidepressant. Well, try this, a statin. Try this. It's all about money making. And what I think recovery is about is like, what am I recovering from? I am not just recovering from the substance. I'm recovering from my poor choices in the context of lifestyle that led me down that path. And so it's not okay to go hang out in a bar with the same, all due respect to those people, losers that dragged you down. The lifestyle changes need to be made. We're recovering from a lot more than just the substance. The substance was trying to cover up the poor lifestyle choices. And an antidepressant or any other pill that your therapist or your psychiatrist is going to push is the same nonsense that your drug dealer or your bartender pushed on you. Have this and you'll feel better, right?
Right. Absolutely.
The answer to the problems is here.
Yeah.
It's inside.
Absolutely.
It's not from some external force or some pharmaceutical company or whatever. So I feel really passionately about that because
I see that.
People are making money off misery when you're in addiction or when you're miserable in recovery.
Right. No, but look, let's get real. Like you said, I mean, I'm a product of a treatment center, and man, it helped change my life.
Right. So much.
Right. You went through a treatment center. So it's not that we're knocking, and because I'm with you on this 100%. The treatment center industry does not want us to succeed. And like you said, the reality is that most guys are not going to make it. Most guys are not going to make it. That is the bottom line. And so, when you think about, well, what can I do to be more successful?
That 1 in 10, the 1 in 10, right?
Right. It should be, well, man, I need to be doing something. I really like how you put that, to recover from the lifestyle that I was living for so long. And that's what seems so out of whack for me. Let me break down kind of what you said in terms of how I think about it a little bit. Sure. Now, when I came into recovery, I saw three types of guys. Okay. So I saw the guy that was, like you pointed out, constantly relapsing, because, and I'm sure you've heard this a million times, they told me to look for the guys that had what I wanted.
Right.
Look for the guys that had what I wanted. So I saw the guy that was constantly relapsing, and I didn't want what that guy had. Right. And then I saw this guy that you're kind of touching on a little bit too, which is the guy who, some of them may have long-term sobriety at some point in time, but they can't get these other areas of their life on track. They're the people, like you said, they keep coming back to the meeting for years and years, and they're dealing with the same problems. And I think kind of like what you're saying is that a lot of the times it's health issues, or it's relationship stuff, or it's other things that would probably be helped by looking at their physical health. Now, the third guy I saw is really the guy that had what I wanted. And these guys they weren't just getting sober, they were staying sober. They were living awesome lives. They seemed to be successful in essentially every area of their life. And they had made fitness and nutrition part of their recovery program. Mm-hmm. And I think that's absolutely vital. It just seems backwards to me that, hey, you know what? We're going to give you another chance at life here. We're going to show you this new way of living, right? But keep treating your body like shit.
We have to break this I'm the victim thing going on in our heads, right? Because like you were saying, there's a gentleman who goes to my home group, very nice guy in New York, and we were at a beginners meeting, and he's really sick with type 2 diabetes, and he's having issues with his eyesight. And he said at this beginners meeting, and I cringed, because crosstalk and all that, but this is just what happens to us alcoholics.
Oh man.
And I'm like, oh my.
Yeah. No.
So, I mean, I cringed. No, it was a lifestyle choice that you made. And, again, I'm not, listen, it's really, it takes a lot of courage to get sober. It's not easy to succeed in recovery. I think it's real hard, actually, just given the dynamics of lifestyle.
Sometimes I get some feedback that I am, judging other people's sobriety or telling people how to live their life. And look, it's nothing like that. The reality is that, man, I'm sure you've lost friends to this disease, and I'm fucking sick of it, man. And it's just like, and I want to go back to something you touched on just real briefly, because I don't want any guys listening to this thinking that we're saying no one needs medication. No one needs.
Absolutely not. That's what I get criticized for.
Yeah, no, because that's not the case, right?
No, it's absolutely not. But it's not. There are people who, for whatever the reason, have a legitimate need for pharmaceuticals. I watched the 60 Minutes interview of a doctor who's now in jail, and he's sitting there saying, I prescribe those opiates in an appropriate way. And the reporter from 60 Minutes looked at him, leaned forward, just like I'm doing now, and said, you prescribed 4,000 opiate pills for a pregnant woman.
Jeez.
And then he goes, he turned, instead of answering the question, because it's an obvious answer, right?
Yeah.
He said, this interview's over. I don't want to talk anymore.
Yeah.
So that, what we're talking about is the abuse that's going on, not legitimate needs for medication.
Sure. Yeah. And I mean, just, and I'm thinking about, like, of course, depression, and there are plenty of people that are dual diagnosis in recovery. And, I think the deal is, you talked about just this instant gratification. We want the fix now, right? And not to say that some people don't need those pills, but I'll give you this example. Okay. So when I was in treatment, I had this moment where I said, because depression runs in my family, and my dad had brought it up to me, maybe, do you think maybe you need to be on some medication or something? And so, I went to the doctor that was at the treatment center, and I simply said, I was like, look, I don't know if I really need to be, just what are your thoughts? I just wanted to come. And he didn't even think twice, wrote me out a prescription for something. And here's what I found is that for me personally, as soon as I started cleaning up my diet a bit, as soon as I started getting a little more active, as soon as I started focusing on some of these self-care things and having a routine and different things like this, man, I realized that I didn't even need the medication, because the deal is, like you already said, I basically got a pharmacy built in here, and all I have to do is put that to work. I think for most of us, I think it's clear there's so many people out there that don't even need to be on some of these medications, right?
Let me speak to that, because it's very important, and I completely relate to your experience, which is similar to mine. But in the exercise, there's a chapter on recovery exercise. So what I did is I studied all the available, again, peer-reviewed studies from credible institutions that looked at the impact of exercise. I'm going to put nutrition aside for a second, because I think we've talked a lot about that. But in the context of exercise, how exercise not only assisted people in substance abuse, but people with a concurrent diagnosis of depression, right? For example, studies show that even 5 minutes of walking outside on a daily basis had a dramatic impact on people who were diagnosed with the concurrent illnesses of substance abuse and depression, compared to the people who refused to exercise.
Well, so I really want the guys listening now. So let's rewind here, because we're on the other side of the fence now. It's easy for us to sit here and say, this is what we need to be doing, and these are all the reasons why. But let's think back to a guy. Let's say we've got a guy that's fresh out of rehab. He's just getting his life back together. And I think that a lot of guys would kind of sit there and say, man, it's too fucking hard to start doing all this stuff. And we go to I think a lot of us go to the overthinking thing, right? So what are some actionable, really simple things that you think that guys can start doing without completely turning their life upside down?
I think the reality is to try and instead of using refined sugar in coffee, for example, replace that with honey. And it sounds like it's a really simple thing, but it can have over the long term big consequences and positive consequences, because refined sugars are going right into your bloodstream, right? They're spiking your blood sugar. They're getting you all hyped up and amped up, and they're full of calories with no nutrients, right? So basically it's a drug. It's a manufactured drug in the same way that other drugs are. Where honey, it's naturally occurring. It breaks down much more slowly into your bloodstream, so you're not getting that major rush. You have more sustainable energy over time, and it contains like healthy antioxidants and other things that your body needs to repair the damage from years and years of substance abuse. So that little change,
Yeah, that's an easy swap right there.
Easy swap, right? So you walk around the block, or instead of taking the elevator up 2 flights, walk up the stairs and put honey in your coffee. Just those 2 things, you're going to start to see changes over time.
I like that. I like that, because I really do think that a lot of guys are just like, we think that we have to change everything overnight. And I don't know what your experience has been, but what my own personal experience has been, and what I've seen in so many of the people that I've worked with, is that really when you try to change, this is for me and just from what I've seen, when you try to change every single thing overnight, like I think a lot of guys think they have to do,
right,
it's not going to last long enough to get the results that you probably want, right?
First of all, we have to stop thinking like addicts and alcoholics.
Man, absolutely.
It's not all or nothing.
Right.
A long-term thing. So you don't have to change everything tomorrow, right? It's a day at a time. We say it's a day at a time, but yet we think like, I got to change everything. So slow down, take it step by step. But the science and the statistics, and I write about it in the book, show that when you make smaller concrete changes slowly over time, it lasts, because it takes time to change a habit. Right? In the same way it takes time to form a habit. So those smaller changes, but sticking to it over time, can lead to major changes down the line. But if the odds are, and the science shows and the statistics show, that if you change everything overnight, it's going to last about a week before you overwhelm yourself.
Yeah.
And then I can't do this anymore.
Can't do it. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. No, I'm with you on that for sure. So I'm probably going to piss some people off with this here, but that's okay. It's my show. I can say I can do what I want here.
Right.
So, but let's say you and I got together, okay, and we decide that we're gonna add on. Now, see, and this is really cool, because actually, I didn't know. I feel like I know a lot about the history of AA, but I didn't know about what Bill Wilson was looking into in terms of nutrition and supplements and some of these other things. So let's assume that we're kind of continuing Bill's work here, that he wasn't given this ultimatum of either, continue with what are termed by some these outside issues, or, stay on the board of AA, basically. And we decide that we're going to add a few steps to the 12 steps, okay, that have to do with addressing the physical aspect of here and the health aspect of all of this.
Mm-hmm.
In your mind, what would some of those steps look like? Those additional steps there?
The way we put it in the book is the best answer to this question.
Okay.
Is to just take the existing steps and modify them for diet and exercise. I wouldn't add on a step. I don't look at it as a linear process. I look at it as a circular process.
Okay. So now let me stop you. That makes sense to me. Okay. Because, and I'll just say this, that, when I think about the fact that we're supposed to be, taking our alcohol problem, our drug problem, these problems that we have to a higher power, I know one thing that had to be pointed out to me is like, well, maybe you should be taking your relationship stuff to this higher power. Maybe you should be taking your health stuff to this higher power. So that makes sense. I appreciate you kind of pointing that out. Now, you were just going to say you think of it as being more circular.
Circular. I think because when you go into a meeting or any place where you see the steps on the wall, it's linear. It comes from the top, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I don't see it that way. I see it as like the circle of life is. It's a circular process, right?
Right.
So the first time you go around the steps, right, you're focused more on the substance that brought you into addiction recovery, right? But hopefully, and here's where I can tell the difference between people who have actually worked the steps and people who participate in the meeting-based program, is when you actually work those steps in the way they were meant to be worked, you see a psychological change in people. You see major behavioral changes because they really have examined their own insides, right? They get to know themselves. So I think after you go through it that initial time in the context of substances, it's almost impossible not to really ponder the ability to apply those steps that are so well thought out to other issues and begin the circle again. Like, in other words, you don't just work the steps and say, I'm healed, right? Have you ever heard anyone say that? Right?
No, not at all.
No. So it's not really a linear process. It's this circular system. My way I see it, you can apply it to nutrition, to exercise.
What I truly believe is that the sobriety, and that you're saying this, is the bare minimum. That's the first go round, right? The sobriety is, man, think about it. Like, sobriety brings me back to ground zero in the real world. Like, really, I haven't done shit.
Right.
I'm doing what every other fucking normal person does on a daily basis, right? So let's be real. It's not an easy thing, but at the same time, you use the word advanced. And what I really think about is it, man, like, for guys like us, we should be striving for more. We should be growing. I mean, the book talks about this idea that basically to stop growing is to die, and I truly believe that. Like, man, I should be, in my
comfort zone should be far more than it was in day one.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Because when
if it's not, there's a real problem.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because let's think about this, and I'm sure you were the same way, but when I came into recovery, what I thought was possible was very limited. Very limited. Right now, what should happen is, like you're saying, is I'm going through the steps and I'm doing this stuff and I'm looking inward and I'm starting to change and I'm starting to grow and my life starts to get better. And then what I think is possible should start to grow too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Right? Absolutely. Absolutely.
So
we're on the same page.
Yeah. So, man, and one thing I wanted to ask you about, because, we haven't touched on this too much, so you've got the program, which you term a lifestyle. And I love that. And I really, really appreciate how you're saying that, this is for people that already have that foundation. And I also, just as a side note, I love how you talk about, doing the inventory when people come in, because I have guys do a similar thing in the sense that they look at the facts of where they're starting out, right? Like, what's actually going on right now. And then every single week they fill out a check-in form called the weekly inventory. So, but one thing I wanted to ask you about is the spiritual adrenaline adventures.
Yeah.
So tell me about that.
All right. So the reality is, so I wanted to do some fun things when I got sober, and I started to get into hiking, and I climbed Mount Kilimanjaro, I do things that make me celebrate my freedom actually from smoking, because I was so limited in my activity. So since I got sober, I climbed Mount Kilimanjaro, I did Mount Rainier, I did the Mount Everest base camp and all this stuff. And I really enjoyed being out in nature, and I love doing these kinds of really challenging trips that allowed me to really push myself out of my comfort zone. Because every time I climbed a mountain, every time I summited a mountain, sleeping for days in a tent, I really started to believe in myself more. Like, I can do anything I put my mind to if I prepare right, and if I really give it all I got. And so I got frustrated too, because I was looking around the recovery world and I found like lots and lots of yoga retreats. But I'm like, don't get me wrong, I was just this last weekend with Nikki Myers and the crew from Y12SR, which is Yoga, the 12-Step Recovery, down in North Carolina at her annual retreat. It was an amazing time. So I'm not against yoga. I love yoga.
Yeah.
But it's not the only thing out there that can benefit people in recovery. So I created Spiritual Adrenaline Adventures, and next April, we're taking people on a sober hike from Cusco to Machu Picchu. It's going to be great. We're going to have 12-step meetings up on the Inca Trail, one Lima. We're going to enter Machu Picchu at sunrise at 6 a.m., the way the Incans would have. I mean, it's just going to be mind-boggling. And so that's next April 2020. If anyone's interested, they can go to our website, which is spiritualadrenaline.com on the adventure page. I want to share those types of trips with people, and I want to make it available to people in sobriety who want to really live differently, step out of their comfort zone, and also get out into nature. Because I just feel when I'm in nature, a connection to the higher power you talked about. I just don't feel when I'm in the city. I live in New York City. I just don't feel it there,
We're not a glum lot, like, right? I mean,
Not the people I hang out with.
This isn't, and so I think, like, and this kind of had to be pointed out to me. My thought was just like, man, what the fuck am I going to do for the rest of my life?
Yeah.
Literally, the answer is whatever you want to do. Remember all those ideas you had about things you wanted to do when you were getting high and drinking that you never did? Do those things. I think the biggest thing about it for me is, and what guys should really be thinking about is that, like, let's say, like, when I started to get in the gym, for instance, it was, man, I never thought I could do that. Look at me do this. Or I'm going on a hike. Like, wow, I never thought I'd be able to, climb this mountain or go on a hike that far. And you're starting to get these little wins that then start to become bigger wins, and you feel better about yourself. And then and it all goes back into the recovery, right? It all goes back.
The confidence that you can do anything you put your mind to. And I think more often than not in life, people pay more attention to people who tell them what they can't do and what they don't know and what they're not, right? And so in recovery, it's better to be around people who tell you the positive things about yourself. But there's nothing better than proving to yourself, I can do that. I'm not stupid.
Yeah.
And I think it just exponentially increases your ability to just dream higher, dream more for yourself, instead of saying, I'm just going to take whatever I can get because that's all I'm worth.
Absolutely. Well, and I've never really thought about it this simply, but it's essentially, man, look what I was able to accomplish. If I can do this, then I can definitely stay sober. Like, this was not an easy thing. I accomplished it. Sobriety is not an easy thing. I can probably stay sober.
It's amazing. You feel good. B, the amount of time it took to drink and do drugs is huge, right?
Yeah.
And so if you put that kind of energy into positive things, first of all, you can do anything you want to do, right? But also, you don't know. This is what we talked about earlier. Day one, when you get out of a rehab, you don't know what you want to do.
No.
You don't know what you're capable of.
No.
And a year out, you may think but then 5 years out, you're going to have a different opinion. Yeah. And then 10 years out, likely because you're continuing to grow.
Right.
And the thing is, that's so different than active addiction, because you just don't grow. It's the same people. And let me say something to you. I walk by some of the same bars I used to hang out in back in the day. It's the same people.
Wow. Yeah.
One of them has a window in the front so you can see who's inside. The same people probably talking about the same bullshit they were talking about back then. Nothing ever changes, right? But this is the complete opposite. So that's why I said earlier, dream bigger. That's my message. Dream bigger. You have nothing to lose and everything to gain.
Man, I love that so much. We are definitely on the same page. We're definitely going to have to do this again and link
anytime, up Jonathan. I appreciate it.
Sometime soon. And and I agree with what you're saying 100%. It's, man, and this is, I share this all the time, and then maybe people get tired of hearing it. I definitely don't get tired of repeating it. And it's just that there's no limit to what is possible in your life in recovery. There's really not. And, part of what I share with the guys that I coach is just that, look, like, these things that maybe we want to accomplish or we dream about, we're realistically going to have to become a new person in order to get there. But when we become that new guy, we're then going to see, once again, just like you were saying, that more new things are possible. Then we're going to become another new person. It's an evolution, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's an evolution. So before we wrap up here, I've got 3 rapid fire recovery questions for you. Okay, Tom?
All right, I'll do my best. Take it easy.
So I'm gonna hit you with them. Okay, and I just want you to come at me with a quick answer. Okay, first thing you think of. Okay, so number 1 here is, if you had to pick one single thing that guys must do for their health in order to stay sober and have quality recovery, what would that be?
Check their testosterone levels to see what the impact of the alcohol and drugs were.
Wow, I like that. That's huge. That's something I don't hear a lot, actually. I really like that.
Critically important. If you read my book, you got to read my book. Opiates and other drugs diminish the testosterone levels substantially, even in guys in their young 20s.
Wow.
More often than not, if you're diagnosed with depression, if you run and you're in your 20s or early 30s and you're a high opiate user or crystal meth or cocaine, you should have your testosterone tested, because I'll bet you it's depleted. It takes 6 months to 8 months to a year for it to come back to normal levels, because your glands have to recover. And if you eat well, you will speed up that process by giving your body the nutrients it needs to heal.
Man, that's huge. That's huge. See, I feel like this
game changer, by the way.
Value in that right there.
Yeah.
Is going to go a really long way to help someone. I guarantee that. So number 2 here, what do you think the biggest mistake that you made early on in recovery was?
Getting addicted to early recovery, in the sense that it's addictive. Don't try to fit in, fit out, in the sense of, I think you need to find people who are doing, like you said earlier, doing the things you want to do, the people you aspire to be more like. I think that recovery can become very addictive. So I don't think you should be living exclusively in that world. You need to maintain a relationship with the outside world.
Man, I love that, because what's the 12th step? It's living these principles in all of my affairs, right? That means I need to take it outside of the rooms a little bit. So number 3 here, what's the biggest gift that your recovery's given you?
Just my mom is sitting right here. She's say hi. Come on, say hi.
I see you, Mom.
Hi.
Well, you asked the question. Ask her.
Hey, Mom. I really, really appreciate you coming on the show, Tom and Mom. And if you want to connect with Tom, you can follow him on Instagram at spiritual_ADR. You can also follow him on Facebook. Absolutely. You can find the book Spiritual Adrenaline on Amazon, right?
Right. Amazon or at Barnes & Noble store. Yep.
Okay. Or Barnes & Noble. Awesome. And if you want to get more information about the Spiritual Adrenaline program or the sober adventures, like the trip coming up to Machu Picchu next year, then you can go to
join us.
Yeah, spiritualadrenaline.com. And again, guys, whether you're listening to the show on Spotify, Apple Music, or even watching on YouTube, please share this with your friends, follow, subscribe, and leave a review. You can find all the information on the show and show notes at the sobrietyblueprint.com/podcast. If you want to ensure that you're living your happiest, healthiest, and most successful life as the man you were meant to be, then you can learn more about the Recover You coaching program at recoveryou.net. Until next time, keep thriving in your recovery and life, and I'll talk to you soon.